Hello, my name is Cassandra Cassidy. I hold a doctorates in nursing practice, and I am a registered nurse in the state of Tennessee. I'm also the founder and CEO of Nurses Mentoring Nurses Corporation. Nurses Mentoring Nurses is a nonprofit corporation dedicated to empowering nurses across all stages of their careers through mentorship, education, and professional development. The organization connects novice nurses with content from subject matter experts to enhance understanding of real world clinical topics while also offering consulting services to experienced nurses seeking continued growth in diverse roles and settings. Its mission is to strengthen the nursing profession by fostering knowledge, confidence, and lifelong professional advancement. So, we're here today to talk about political advocacy and how it impacts policy and laws for the novice nurse. With us today, we have a guest speaker, Mark Miller, who has a doctorate in nursing practice. He is an advanced practice registered nurse holding board certification in adult gerontology, acute care nurse practitioner. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. It's so exciting to be here. I'm happy to talk politics and advocacy with you.
So before we jump into that, I would just like to define what advocacy is. Advocacy is the act of actively supporting, speaking up for, and protecting the rights, needs, and well-being of others, particularly those who may be vulnerable or unable to do so for themselves. Advocacy is an integral part to nursing, as it is foundational responsibility in nursing because we nurses are uniquely positioned at the patient's bedside and serve as a primary link between patients, families, and the healthcare system. It is embedded in professional standards such as the American Nursing Association's Code of Ethics and is essential to delivering safe, ethical, and patient-centered care. In essence, advocacy is essential to nursing practice because it ensures that care is not only clinically effective, but also ethical, individualized, and aligned with the patient's best interest. So, starting with that, Mark, can you describe how we see advocacy when we look at the political arena?
Yeah, and Cassandra, I agree with you because advocacy really we have to start with is not optional for our profession. It is a professional responsibility. So when we're at the bedside, when we advocate at one patient at a time, that's critical and important. And nurses do that every day. But in policy, we start to advocate for the entire population. And so the difference is really scale, not skill. When we move into that political arena, advocacy becomes more structured and more strategic. That's all. This is where nurses start to engage with legislators, they contribute to policy discussions, and they help shape the laws that define how that care is delivered. Healthcare policy is being written every day, and so the only question really is whether nurses are helping to write or reacting to it after the fact. From a national perspective, we're seeing a shift. Nurses are no longer just participants in healthcare systems. We're increasingly recognized as essential voices in designing the systems, and whether it's access to care or workforce challenges or even public health, we bring real world credibility that policymakers simply don't have, particularly in Tennessee, where we're both at. So if nurses are not in the room, the patient perspective is really missing, and that has real consequences. And I think that's the big difference.
All right. I couldn't agree more. Can you also explain how these advocacy efforts impact mandated policies or laws?
Yeah, I mean, as nurses and advanced practice nurses, we live in that kind of evidence-based policy world where best practices that have been replicated by our peers are used to direct things like blood pressure management or diabetes management. But one of the biggest misconceptions is that evidence alone drives policy. It just simply doesn't. If it did, many of our healthcare challenges would have already been solved. Policy changes when advocacy is organized, consistent, and strategic. It requires relationships, communication, and persistence over time, telling our personal stories. Nurses play that critical role in the process because we help translate those complex clinical realities into real human centered personal narratives that policymakers can understand and act on. At the national level, many of the policies that we see today, whether related to scope of practice, workforce investment, care delivery models, they're all the result of sustained advocacy efforts where those messages are being shared. And I think this is the key point. Laws and policies are not abstract. They are really built over time by people who choose to engage. If nurses are not part of that process, decisions are made without the insight of those closest to patient care. Shirley Chisholm, the first African American woman elected to Congress and the first to run for a major political party, is often attributed with saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I think that's very true. And I think nurses have to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. So, having discussed what political advocacy is and how it impacts our policies and laws, can you describe how the novice nurse can support political advocacy efforts and why it matters for them to do so as a professional?
Yeah, for the novice nurse, this can really feel intimidating, but it shouldn't be. And you and I know from our involvement in our state nursing associations that we often hear that when nurses take those first steps in getting involved. But you don't need a title and you don't need years of experience to begin engaging in advocacy. What nurses do need is an awareness and a willingness to participate. So that can look as simple as staying informed on the issues that affect your patients. It can be joining a professional organization and actually engaging, or even communicating on your own with elected officials about what you're seeing in your own practice. Your clinical experience, even early in your career, is incredibly valuable, and nurses need to know that. In many ways, it's the most authentic voice in any policy discussion that happens in a state or national capital. And here's why this matters: the policies being written today will define the nurse you're allowed to become tomorrow. And the novice nurse needs to understand that they're going to shape the scope of practice. It's going to shape your work environment. It's going to shape your staffing levels and even your patient's access to care. So if nurses are not actively engaged, we're really leaving those decisions to others who may or may not fully understand the realities of healthcare delivery. So I would say, just like with your organization, Nurses Mentoring Nurses, find that person that you know is involved in advocacy and ask them for help, ask them for guidance, because as nurses, we need to be paying that forward. It's important to our profession.
Wow, I couldn't agree more, Mark. Thank you so much for giving us an overview about advocacy and what it looks like and the importance of it to us as a nursing individual and as a profession at large. I really do appreciate you taking this time to speak with us. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
I appreciate being here. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for what you're doing. You know, nurses, we really are the most trusted profession in healthcare. And so the opportunity in front of us now is to also become the most influential, because we don't just deliver care, we define what it looks like. So thank you for your work and elevating this voice, and for having me on today.
Thank you. If you would like to see other videos, nurses mentoring nurses will be producing more content. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.